Hello, all. Ready for tech that reflects the global world? Welcome to our podcast, The Global Code. We go beyond the buzzwords to explore real world tech solutions for and with everybody, everywhere in the age of AI. I'm your host, Dr. Salima Bhimani, maven of moonshots, as Shadan likes to call me. Shadan Deleveaux, the G-force of talent, and Ashish Pujari, the master of engineers. And today we're super, super, super excited because we have an incredible guest with us today. And I'm going to pass it over to Shadan to introduce her.
Hey, everyone. Super excited to have with us Janeya Griffin. Janeya is an accomplished speaker, HBCU STEM graduate, and a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Over the past 12 years, Janeya has earned 2 degrees, a certificate, and secured a contracting job with NASA, where she thrived as an award-winning lead technology transfer specialist and an executive board member of federal labs nationwide. After nearly a decade at NASA, Janeya founded the Commercializer LLC, a consulting startup that bridges the gap between resources and historically excluded communities. Her firm helps bring independent inventor ideas to market and develops ecosystems of sustainability at HBCUs. Her passion for helping others also led her to co-found Concreates in 2017, an award-winning creative agency that challenges societal stigmas surrounding individuals with criminal histories. Amidst the pandemic, Janeya recognized the projected economic disparities facing communities of color and transitioned her expertise to change the new space economy. She earned a master's in space leadership, business, and policy, and founded the Equity Space Alliance. This organization advocates for a diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible space economy through ownership, media, resourcing, community building, and educational campaigns. Hello, Janeya.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. And I feel like I need a name. I need a name. Maybe by the end of this, we'll have what my name is.
How about the goddess of the universe? How about the goddess of the universe? Because I'm liking that one.
I feel like that's already there. We need another name.
I like it. I like it. Something in space. Something in space.
Yeah. I was calling myself, so originally I called myself the Commercializer, right? And then I'm like, now turned space revolutionist. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
I love it. I love it. We love it. Well, on that note, I mean, you have this incredible, incredible background. I had honestly never heard of anybody that works in the space economy. It was like, who is this person that's doing this incredible work? But we really want to start with this question of like, what brought you to space? Like, what is there a story or a moment where you said, space is where I want to work?
There absolutely is. And I, I like Shadan said, I worked in space at NASA as a contractor for almost a decade. So it was 8.5 years. And once I left NASA, I really started to focus on my ventures. And so Concreates was one of those, and the Commercializer was another. And so I ended up getting this contract with Baylor College of Medicine and their TRISH program, which is the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. Now, I had never heard of anything like that, but I knew it was in space. But their whole goal was like, hey, we really want to tap into communities of color. We have all this funding that we give out through solicitations for research, for postdocs, and not traditional PIs and principal investigators. And we want to understand why we're not getting any people of color who are applying. And so from that, it was like, okay, well, I'm really tapped into communities of color outside of being a person of color. I work with HBCUs. I worked with underserved communities. So, let me see if I can help you. So I put together a team and we did a mixed method study where we looked at the barriers that existed for people of color who were researchers in STEM. And what were those barriers as it pertained to them getting funding for their research around STEM, around space health, around space medicine. And that took me down this rabbit hole of doing research around space and like who was doing it, what was going on. And then I found this report that I cannot find today because it's so buried. But there was a report and it had 100 faces on the cover. And the title of it said, The New Space Economy. And it was not one person of color that was on that report. And I was like, how is this possible? Like I looked and I'm like, okay, there's astronauts on here. We have Black astronauts. We have people of color who are astronauts. I just don't understand. Like, did you guys not reach out to them? Like, what is happening? Right. And we see this so very often where it's not necessarily like we want to exclude you. It's we just are not intentional about finding people who don't look like us and making sure that they have a seat at the table with us. Right. And so I said, okay, well, once I started looking up what is this new space economy? What does this mean? Because I've been in the space industry for years, right? But it's all been about NASA, it's been about contracts, and we talk about the SpaceX and the Virgin Galactics and the ULAs and all of these different prime contractors, but it was never really about like commercial space, right? It was never really about like the private entities that are coming and then also going to space. And so I kind of saw it before it actually happened. And I didn't want people of color to get left behind. So I said, we need to know about this, especially with our wealth being projected to be zero by 2053 for Black communities, for Latinx communities, it's by 2073. How is this projection still on the same trajectory if we have new economies that are projected to be $1.3 trillion by 2030? Still a thing. Like, I just don't say it just doesn't match up. It doesn't make sense. And so at that point, I said, okay, I need to do something about this. And I really started just from low hanging fruit by creating an educational campaign just to bring awareness to it. It's called Melanin on Mars. And it was really about just showcasing Black people in this space so that they could see themselves in a space environment type of thing. And so then that led to me wanting to do more work around this, and then me getting my master's in space leadership and business and policy. And then after that, the campaign that I had created for Trish was increasing diversity in space. And so we did that whole campaign, which is really great. They created their diversity program based on the recommendations that our team provided them. And they're doing really well. And so my company couldn't be called Increasing Diversity in Space. So that's how it became the Equity Space Alliance.
It's brilliant, and I love it for multiple reasons. I think you hit the nail on the head, and you said so many things, but I think one of the things that really resonated with me was this aspect of creating awareness for underrepresented folks of even this the opportunity. And I wonder, and I'm curious just about your thoughts around what do you think it is that's keeping people of color from the space economy? Why have they not necessarily been exposed or been able to participate as one might expect to this, like you said, multi-trillion-dollar opportunity?
I just need to cut in there. So for a layperson, what do we mean by space economy? Let's start there because I would like to have the listeners have this context, because when we say space economy or space industry, I am thinking Star Trek, right? But is that what it is?
Yeah. So, I mean, even just to break down, just an economy in general, right? Within your economy, you have different industries that all help to fuel that economy and push it forward. There's innovations that come out of it. There are collaborations, right? People are working together. And then there are things that are being sold, right? And monetized or commercialized, right? And so within the space industry, there is now, because again, going back to what I was saying before, was like, it was just the government. The government was in space. That was what was happening. And then if you got a government contract, then you were essentially in space. But now what we're seeing is there are a lot of commercial entities that are that have leveraged the government, right, and all the work and the research that they've done ahead of time to now enter into the private sector, which is, now you're seeing these billionaires say like, oh, I'm just going to do this myself and then I'm going to go to space. And then you see space tourism and you see satellites. So that $1.3 trillion projection is really just like satellites, rocket launches, and different things that are happening within the industry currently right now. But that is set to grow as we see other industries come on board, like space tourism, with like commercial space stations and hotels in space and all of these different things that could, come out of it. And then there's also, the research that's happening within this industry to create innovations that maybe will help space or will help to propel it. Now we're talking about manufacturing in space and what does that look like? And maybe some of the resources that are going to be brought back down to earth from like asteroid mining. So all of these different industries and new industries are starting to pop up where money is starting to be made from them that will then go into what this economy is around that, right? So that's just from my vantage point, right? Somebody else might have a completely different definition. I do not proclaim to be an expert in that. And so to go back to your question, it was, okay, tell me your question again around, I know it was, let's break down what the space economy is, but what was your question specifically? Oh, why are Black people not, or people of color not participating? And I think a big reason is that they don't believe that it's for them. One of the main responses that we get when we're out and we're talking to people is, that ain't for us, that's for white folk. Like literally that's what they say. I'm like, no, it's not. It's actually for everybody. And so it's important that we start to have this representation, because one thing that I will say about NASA is that they have a really big population of Black people at their centers. So they are an organization and an agency that I think does it very well. Like, so Black people are 14% or 15% of the population, and NASA is very close to that representation, essentially, in their as employees and contractors. And so, I think it's really important that people start to see more people who are in this space. That's where we have like hidden figures and, there's so many stories that have not been told of people of color that have contributed to space exploration and where we are currently right now with our innovations that have either come from space or come from space adjacent industries or space adjacent projects. And but have still helped, like satellites, the GPS navigation, and all of those different things that people don't necessarily realize that a lot of the things that we use every single day have stemmed from our want and our need to explore space. And out of that, it's like, oh, hey, here's an invention that we can also use in a commercial capacity or as, a commercial application, like the cameras in our iPhones or even the cameras in our laptops. There are many cameras. And that came from NASA, baby formula, memory foam mattresses. So all those nice, Tempur-Pedic mattresses that we sleep on and the pillows, and we can thank NASA for that. So I think it's really more so about them being able to see themselves and know that it's for them and know that they're using it every single day and just don't realize it. And it's not so far-fetched, because like all they see is what the media puts out, and that's billionaires going to space, and somebody else just launched into space, and it cost however much money to get up there. And so the thought is that one, space is not for us. And two, it's for billionaires. And three, they just want to go to another planet so that they can have something offer themselves. And though that may be true, I don't know, right? I don't proclaim that to know that it is. I'm not in these conversations. But a big part of it is to do research and science. And so we need to understand that, if we want to make sure that um the world is for us or made with us in mind, we have to be a part of the conversations. We have to be a part of the development of that. And so that's why it's really important that, with the work that we're doing, to get people to understand and bring awareness to, hey, here is how it benefits you. Here's what your role in it could be. This is how you can get involved. This is what it looks like. Let me introduce you to somebody that looks just like you, that comes from exactly where you come from, that actually is in the industry. Um, and then letting them know that it's not just about rocket scientists and engineers and astronauts, and there's so many other roles and career paths that also contribute to our exploration of space and innovating in that area.
I mean, I think what's really interesting about what you're saying and where my head went to is that, I mean, I think I'll just say people of color more broadly, but we know that, individualized communities have individual experiences that are unique and different. Like Black communities are having a different experience than brown communities are. So I wanted to say that. But in general, what I'll say is like, it is hard for people of color to think about the future when the present is so daunting, And I imagine that space feels like the future. It feels like the thing that's not here yet. And do we have time, energy, or resources to actually be thinking about it? But I think what you're doing is you're saying, in fact, yes, that might be true. And we know that there are already barriers that we exist in today. And by the way, this thing is happening. Like the future is happening now. And so are people of color part of building it, or are we again going to be on the receiving end like we've been, unfortunately, over the last like 500 years, of like and that's an overgeneralization, but you know what I mean? Like just in the sense of like are we going to be at the forefront of history, or are we going to be in the
Okay.
background of history? Or at least somebody else writing our history for us.
Yeah, and I think the challenge also is that, like, we're trying to survive. Like, I don't care about
Exactly.
you talk about space, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna pay my bills next month,
Exactly.
next week. Like, how am I gonna put food
Exactly.
on my table? How am I gonna take care of my kids? And you want me to think about space like that? Yeah,
Right.
no. Like, I'm just not doing that. That's not something that I'm gonna spend my energy or my time
Yeah.
on. Not realizing that even the food that we come up with, the stuff that's nutritional, like, hey, I got to figure out how to get my baby formula. But did you know that baby formula is only nutritional because they did a long duration. There was a long duration space flight. There was a study on algae that they did to figure out how they could nourish the astronauts, and that is the reason why baby formula is nutritional now, because that same algae that they found in that study is put in there. Like it's it's crazy. It's crazy. So I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
just about really, pun intended, bringing it back down to earth, for them so that they actually understand like what's happening and that it's not too far fetched, and that, yes, though, you may be trying to survive and focusing on that, like there's nothing wrong with also thinking about ways in which you can be involved so that you're not left behind, so that we don't repeat, history all over again. And then we're on another planet and you're still trying to survive there. Like, I mean,
Yes.
granted, we will be, but just, you know what I'm saying, in a completely
Yeah.
different way. So,
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting story about the baby formula. Using that as a jump off point, are there like things similar to, and I'm going to refer to the baby formula example as like technology, right? So essentially, the algae
mhm.
was a technology that was discovered or created for the purposes of nutritional or nutrition for astronauts. So, is there something that you have seen or you foresee or you wish that was there, like built into the technology of the space economy or space industry, which really doesn't care about the intention, but it will just make sure that there is the requisite amount of representation, right? Like something that's in the system, which will not allow it to become like completely a thing that like goes off on its own, right? Have you seen something like that?
Um, in a sense of like program that people are working on or doing, or maybe you could clarify a little
Yeah, it can be
more.
programs, or it can be something that's like just so foundational that it's difficult to really get around it. If that makes sense.
I guess what comes to mind for me is the intention of, just the exposure part of it. So there's so many. So there's this thing that I always say is like, if, let's just say hypothetically, we're not in the forest, right? But there's a tree and it falls and there's nobody around. Does it still make a sound? And I say that because there's so many different resources that exist for people. Like, I only know about this because I'm in the thick of it, right? This is my job to go out and talk to people and tell them about all of the great things that NASA, and not just NASA, but all the federal labs have done and what they have created, and, how they, GPS and, memory foam mattresses and all of these different things. And so I only know this because I'm there. But what I will say is that they do a poor job in getting this information out to people. And then that's why people don't know about it, right? But you can't say, hey, I put it on the website. We created all these beautiful materials, which they are, right? There's lovely platforms and games and all this stuff that educates people about it. And it's there, but nobody knows that it exists. They don't know where it is. They don't know how to get to it. They've never seen it before. Most of the times when I'm bringing it up, it's the first time that they've ever seen it. And so I think that there needs to be a better job at integrating this information and these programs and these materials into inner cities, into nonprofit organizations that already have like the touch points because they're boots on the ground. They're with these communities every single day. And instead of asking them to come to us to get this information, we need to go to them. And so I think that could really change the trajectory of things, because you have a lot of not just students who are eager to learn this information and be exposed to it, but you don't know what you don't know. And so it's an educational aspect even for parents. And so when they learn about it, they're like, oh my gosh. And then they go down this rabbit hole of like trying to find the things. But if they've never had even just the exposure to, hey, something like this actually exists, they wouldn't know what to search for. They wouldn't know like where to look. And so I think just from a foundational perspective, there's the spin-off magazines that exist. And people talk about that, but there's like years and years and years, and they're full. They're like this thick of all the technologies that have been commercialized out of NASA. There's a whole website that is geared towards an interactive website that you can go and you can search around, and it's a city, and it's called NASA Home and City. And they have everything and the stories behind them and even videos. So in terms of, like I said, they have this great content. It's all there, but people don't know that these things exist. So it's how do we get this information out there so that people can start to be exposed to it? They can start to see it. And then organically, it will start to take off. Then they will start to, you'll get another me, right? You'll get somebody that's like, oh, I need to create content around this. I need to start sharing this on social media and all of these different things. And then you'll see this trickle down effect. So I hope that answers your question, but I'm not sure if it did.
Yeah, it did. Basically, to summarize what you said is like make the information so extremely available to everyone, including mainly for underrepresented communities, that it's difficult to ignore, and it just starts this chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Because even though we have, and people say, oh, well, if I give you a laptop, that means now you have access to the world and you have access to the internet. But again, If I don't know what I don't know, how do I know what to type into Google? Like, how do I know what to search? How do I know? I don't know. Until somebody tells me or until I see something, I'm like, oh, let me now go do some research around that. But yeah.
So I'm curious and really just want to take a step back and so now you're in space. Right? Want to go back to what was your path there? How'd you get from Earth to space?
So it was very, very rigorous. No, I was not the person, and I have a TEDx that I say this, but I was not the person that was like, "Ooh, I want to work for NASA, and I dream about the stars, and I want to go to space." And like that was not me. That was no, I wasn't even thinking about that. But I ended up getting 2 bachelor's degrees, one in criminal justice and the other in forensic chemistry. And I did some internships very early on. So I actually worked at NASA my junior year of high school. And I was they called us NASA Sharpie. We were it was an apprenticeship program. And they essentially they paid us, but they allowed us to, you know, try out to see like if this is something that we wanted to do. And they let us pick which career or what profession we wanted to be in. So I was like, I really wanted to be a computer tech originally. And until I looked up computer tech, and then I saw computer engineer next to computer tech, and I was like, oh, well, computer engineers make way more money. So like, let me just do that because I thought it was the same thing. Like, great, I could be an engineer in computing until I found out that all they did was program all day and sit behind a screen. And I was like, listen, this is not me. I want to talk to people. I want to be out and about. I need to be engaging with people. And so I was like, I don't want to do programming. But I did get the chance and the opportunity to actually experience that and know that it's something that I didn't want to do. So it led me down the road to, okay, now I want to do crime scene investigation because I also did like this after school program where they would like set up crime scenes and then they could have you come in and solve them. And I really loved that. But ultimately, it was the fact that I was a problem solver and I'd like to establish connection. And so whether that's connecting with people, connecting the dots, problem solving, finding these solutions, that is something that I really love to do. And I did it all the time. And so once I graduated from college, I ended up going to Cal State University San Bernardino. And they had a program that was called the Integrated Technology Transfer Network. And it took STEM students from HBCUs. I graduated from Grambling State University. And it taught us the business side of things. So we could speak the scientist language, but then translate that into a value proposition that business people would be able to understand. So that was my first introduction to commercialization, to technology transfer, to intellectual property, to venture capital. Before there was this whole, like, there's no diversity in VCs. Like I was in the rooms with them and they were like telling us like, oh, this is how you need to do your due diligence. This is how you need to look at pitches and like all these different things. And then decided that I wanted to do tech transfer because we did a project with the Army Research Lab and a couple of different federal labs, the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana. We did some consultancies there, but they taught us how to break down patents and then find the commercial like use for them and then like literally do a commercialization assessment. And I fell in love with that process because I felt like I could utilize everything that I knew, all of the experiences that I've had, the things that I've seen, things that I've been exposed with to find alternative uses for something that was, developed for something completely different. And so that's where that problem solving and that connecting the dots came in. So I fell in love and I was like, oh yeah, I want to do this. And then I ended up applying for jobs all over. And then I got hired at NASA through a contract. And ever since then, it was just like, that was eight and a half years later. I'm like, oh, let me start a company around this. Let me help HBCUs because they don't have tech transfer. And that kind of led me now into like the politics of space and like the new space economy and what that looks like and how we need to be advocated and making sure that, we have ownership in this new economy. I wasn't like, one, I'm not a Trekkie. Star Wars, and I know people are like, what? It's cool, but I love Mandalorian. That's cool. But as far as like the traditional, like NASA, like Star Wars universe, like galaxy type of like fan, that's not me. It wasn't. I mean, now I'm more interested in it because I'm going to learn as much about it so that I can take that information back to my community. But I'm not like, woo.
I think those stories are so important because a lot of times I feel that people see folks in these specialized areas, whether it's technology or space and think, oh man, this is probably a person who probably always knew what they wanted to be and had this idea and have just been working towards that their entire lives. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that your career is something, one, that you may only have it in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
And then two, you may just discover it on the way. So for some folks, you take a look at their career path and it looks more like a treasure map because they just have a natural curiosity and affinity for certain things. And then as they're learning, growing, and progressing, they're gradually putting those skills, interests, and competencies together to actually carve out something that's new. So I love stories like that because it continues to make the space more accessible for those folks who are thinking, well, I don't know, could I be in space? I don't like Star Trek either, and I don't like Star Wars, and so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say is I had to find out who I was not in order to find out who I was. And so going and testing and seeing what I don't like and no, that ain't it. That ain't it. I like this. Okay, yep, I'm done with that. Let me go to the next thing. Let's say, it's really helped. But understanding what I was passionate about and what my purpose was, I think has always been like standard, right? And so when I have that and I can take that into any industry, and as long as I'm problem solving, I'm loving what I'm doing and I don't feel like I'm doing work. And so I feel like I've been blessed to say like that I love what I do and I get paid to do what I love. and not everybody can say that, so I think it is about perspective and mindset and the fact that like that's what I'm focusing on when I'm working or when I'm making decisions and like what my next move is going to be and all of these different things. And so I always have fun wherever I go.
Uh,
I also get the sense that your curiosity is such that you're willing to go into places that you don't know. Like you're willing to like sort of walk into the unknown and be like, okay, you end up learning about the space economy and you dive right into it. Some other person would look at it and go, oh, okay, no, I'm not even touching that because it's probably big and overwhelming. But you jump right into it, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think, just it is about perspective, but I think that's also my mindset because I'm just that way in life in general. Like um, I do things scared because I feel like you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's where the growth happens, right?
Mm.
Like if I feel comfortable, I don't feel like I'm growing. I don't, and so like it's almost
Yeah.
like I put myself in these positions to feel uncomfortable so that I can grow. But I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm excited. I'm anxious, but I still do it. Like, so I am very like, I'm the adventurous friend that like, I've been skydiving. I jumped off the side of the stratosphere. Like I just do all these like crazy things and not because like I'm an adrenaline junkie, but I'm like, oh, that looks cool. Like, let me try that because I want to conquer my fear. Like when I got up to that, I was like, oh, my ears are popping. Oh, we're high. I don't think I thought this through. Like I'm scared and I just do it anyway. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, I take that, I guess that concept or that like methodology and I just apply it to my life in anything, in any area of that. And so, yeah, I get people that approach me with like, hey, you want to do this TEDx? And I was like, no, like, I don't want to And they're like, okay, well, I'm not asking you, you're doing it. I'm just like, oh, all right, well, I guess I'm doing it. I'm super scared. Hey, do you want to teach this class? Like, I've never taught a class in my life. Oh, like, whoo, like, you get these feelings. The chest gets tight. Like, so, I think doing things scared, that's where the growth happens. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Can I dive a little bit deeper on maybe getting people started, right? Like, what would you think are the areas which are like low barrier of entry, easy to get started? I don't need a PhD. I don't need to be jumping off of cliffs or whatever, right? What can we recommend to just any random person on the street?
To get into space?
Yeah, to be part of the space economy, do your own startup, that 10x idea, which I can start without $1 billion.
Yeah. Well, one, just education. Like we have the Equity Space Alliance is for profit. We also have our nonprofit arm, which is the Equity Space Alliance Association. And that's the education. That's the programming. That's the let's build out these campaigns. Let's do these different activations so we can get people kind of involved in what's going on. And then our for-profit part is the consulting part, is let's help you get government contracts. Let's help you, figure out what your space strategy is. Let's connect you to HBCUs and small businesses, all these different things, right? And so I think if you want to get involved with, just being in the space industry, one, it doesn't even necessarily have to be, I don't want to say it doesn't have to be around space, but it does. You can be space adjacent, right? Like you can be in a space adjacent, or you can have a space adjacent product, or something like that. But what we see a lot of is for graphic designers, if now our social media person, she was like this on the cover of magazines, doing photography and stuff like that. And so now she does social media explicitly for space companies, for space organizations. And so she's in the space industry now, right? She's now getting a part of those budgets that come from from the space companies. That's still a part of the space economy. So it's finding those different things, and maybe the things that you really are a genius at. Like maybe you do marketing, maybe you do graphic design, maybe you're good with fashion, like making patchings, or now we see space suits being designed by these organizations that are not in not NASA, right? There's so many different things that you could start to provide for organizations that are in the space, or even NASA. Like what other opportunities, let's just say a janitorial company, and they want to get, maybe contracts at NASA. I think all of those are really important things because it takes a village, right? I can't come and use a facility that is not clean in order to, do my mathematics, or come up with different algorithms that's going to help, this space shuttle launch in the and project the different projectile and all these different things. I can't do that if my facilities are not clean, or if I don't have a facility to do it in, right? So I think we don't think about the really, I would say they're not inconsequential, but that's how they're viewed in this whole realm of space, because those budgets are not necessarily a part of that $1.3 trillion, economy, because you're looking at satellites and launches. But if the people who are actually launching the rockets can't do their job because there's certain things, how do they, you have the PR people, you have the media people, you have the people who are in communications. It takes a village, and people don't necessarily think about, when they think about NASA, they think about space. All you think about is satellites and rockets being launched. That is it. But it takes the financial team, it takes insurance people, it takes lawyers, it takes program managers, the facilities people, the janitorial people, like it takes everything to make all of that run cohesively. And so when I think about the space industry, that's what I'm thinking about. You don't necessarily need to be an astronaut going to space, but you can contribute to them doing their work and them getting that work done, because it takes a team in order to get that done, right? Now, if you ask other people, it's really going to be based around like the technical components, right? Like what can you be providing, whether that's nuts and bolts or, circuit boards or Raspberry Pis or different things like that, even in the IT space, right? They need help in IT. They need, you need to know certain like technical or even keywords like what is a skiff? If we're talking about classified stuff, like just all of these different things that you need to be learning about, and certain certifications and things that you will need that you wouldn't necessarily need in another industry that you would need for space, or even in cybersecurity, right? Like there's literally right now the war is happening in space with the satellite, and who's going to get to the moon first, and like all of these different things that are going on. And so national security is a really big thing. Hence Space Force, hence like all of these things, right? It's not just to like, oh yeah, we're going to have aliens when, when we encounter them, and we need to have, but it's a lot of just inconsequential things I think that we believe are inconsequential, but are not. So there's so many things. And even like, what I like to tell people, from a low hanging fruit type of thing is we have commercial space stations that are being developed. Hilton is a part of that. If you think about just from a foundational thing, right? Hilton has vendors. If let's just say now we're going to have a hotel in space that Hilton has, or a hotel, right, in space that Hilton has created. The vendors of Hilton will then be able to put their things in space. But if those products have not been tested in space, if they haven't been, if they're not space ready, then, and if we're not a part of that, we don't get those contracts. We're not even like close in the running because we're not even thinking about, hey, this could be a thing. And I need to be looking to see like how what I'm doing will show up in space or how it can work in space. Yeah, just little things like that, right? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, those were like amazing examples. And this one final question from my end, from the perspective of which is kind of the question of the at least this year, is what is the role of artificial intelligence or AI in the space economy?
Um, that's a really that's a lot, right? Because the way that AI is being used now, like you have the generative AI and people are coming up with all types of apps and all of these different things to run things. But I think the ways in which we may use AI around space could be very I'll say this too. I think it also depends on how you define AI, right? And how that has been used and at what level or what tier are we talking about, right? Because AI has been around for a very long time. Now the public is just getting it in a certain way, but the government has been using it for a while now. Now, it may have shown up in different ways, right? Not necessarily how it's being packaged currently, but it may have been showing up in different ways years before. So I think if we are thinking about what we see and how AI has been packaged currently right now, which is the generative AI or the large language learning models, or the being able to automate certain things, right? Um, a lot of the ways in which the shuttle, well, I don't say the shuttles, but the rockets are being made now. So what people don't realize is that the billionaires that are going to space, right? SpaceX is being funded by the government. Okay. So it's not just all of their own money. Bezos, maybe where you could say like Blue Origin, maybe there's a lot of funding that they have used, but the rockets that are being launched for NASA are SpaceX rockets, right? And that's because they have a contract with the government to actually create this in collaboration with them and to use their launch pads and all of these different things. And so a lot of that is tech based, right? So it's not necessarily like the old way where they would have to actually like pilot the rocket or the shuttle. This is like screen and they swipe in and touch screens and like all these different things. And so it's a computer now that is essentially running and operating this. So now Victor Glover, he talked about this because he's a pilot that is now set to go to the moon, right? And so he was saying how it's different, right? Like he's a pilot now, but really he's just operating the computer and having to make sure that all of that is working. And that's a different type of structure than what was before. And so I think when we see how AI is being used now and how innovative it's going to be, it's really to help us in terms of being resourceful. So if there is an AI model that is integrated into our ships or into these rockets, it's I think how it will be used and maybe is in projections and like, hey, it's doing calculations and increasing the speed at which we do things. Now maybe later on down the road, that's not even later. Now they have robots that are like replacing it. And in China, that's a whole nother conversation. Like they're doing a whole lot with AI. And so it is not just about, because there's different space agencies. You have the Chinese Space Agency. Obviously US is the one that everybody sees, but China just made it to the moon, right? Like they're already on there. They're already doing a whole bunch of stuff and they're very technologically inclined. So I could see that being integrated into a lot of the things that they're doing. Now I don't recall for certain, but I do know that there's a company called Relativity, and they are 3D printing rockets, right? The real, because I ended up having to do this as a case study in my master's program, but the real kind of like key, like the secret sauce for them is not the fact that they're 3D printing rockets. They just so happen to be 3D printing rockets, right? Their glue is that it's their IP. It's that the fact that they can 3D print these very large things. So really overall, they're like a 3D printing company, but they just so happen to like their first use case is a rocket. Like, let's see if we can actually 3D print this rocket and then if it can like go to space. But the thing about their 3D printing, the intellectual property behind it is that it allows them to kind of test before they actually print it. So it'll throw out a whole bunch of different examples and like, hey, it's off by this much. So instead of now having to go back through in the supply chain and find out like where it went wrong, it will generate that for them and say like, oh, I'm imagining it's like a certain percentage of like, yes, this is going to be this, it will launch. If not, like this is not going to work because it's not fully solid before they actually start to print it out. So being able to use like tools and stuff like that where they can look at the efficiency of how things are being made in the supply chain, because that's where most of the time comes from in actually assembling the stuff, putting it together, making sure like every nut is tightened and torqued to a certain, certain tightness. But Yeah, I think that's how I'm seeing it used now. But like in the future, there may be other things where, you know, I forget what movie it was, and they were like robots and they were talking to them, and you had to like link with it and put this thing on your ear. I think Jennifer, what's her name? Um, what's the singer's name? Jennifer
Lopez.
For Hudson?
Lopez. No, not I was
Lopez.
about to say Hudson, but Jennifer Lopez, she's in it.
Yeah.
And I forget what it's called, but it's a good movie. I'll look it up and send y'all the title of it so you can go watch it. But yeah, they have like it's all AI based. So
Yeah. Janeya, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I think you've really given us like such a different point of view about how economies change and grow, and I think what you're sort of opening us up to is that we shouldn't have sort of a narrow perspective or point of view on what's the potential for economic growth is and where that economic growth might be. And I think as people of color, or communities have not necessarily been at the center of economies for a long time, unless they're labor that's being used. I think what you're trying to do, I interpret it as you're trying to open up the space for people to see them as being at the center of the economy, and of this new economy that has a lot of potential. And I think that is, I've learned a ton from you already. So I think you're really opening up the aperture for people to think about potential access and opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise thought of.
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
and one I appreciate, you all's time and and I'm just like you said, I'm just curious. Like a lot of the stuff like I could be completely wrong about. Like we who knows what it would look like. Right. And, years down the road and,
Right.
but I just know this is what I'm doing right now. So, if whether that's wrong or it's right, I don't really believe in wrong, or right. I just believe in it just is. And then there was this, I don't know who it was, but they said this one thing and it really really changed my perspective on things. And it said, the future is not real. Because when you get there, it's the now. And I'm like,
Mhm.
what? How does this work? But it really opened up my mind to like, wow, like, I get it, but I'm still a futurist. Like, I'm still like thinking about
Yes.
things like what I'm envisioning what it can look like. But then when I do get there, it is the now. So like, when is the future? Like, where? Where is the future? So,
Yeah,
no, but
but
I
you're
appreciate
bringing the
you guys
future
having me
to
on.
us. You're bringing it
Yeah,
to us,
yeah.
you're making it tangible and real, and you're saying, "Hey, like, there are so many of us who could be contributing to it today," Who knows
Mhm.
what, like, to your point, we don't know what's gonna be in 10 or 20 or 30 years, we might have projections, but at the end of the day, most people think of themselves as outside of that, but you've brought us to the center of it. So thank you very, very, very much, and we're looking forward to seeing where all of your work goes, and following you. We're gonna be following you on every social media platform possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Thank you so much.
amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, friends. So let's jam. What did you think about that conversation?
Yeah, listen, I feel like my mind is kind of blown. I think Janeya did an amazing job of just helping me to understand and even expand my mindset around the space economy and what's included and things
Mhm.
being space economy adjacent. Um, it was a similar epiphany that I had when I came into tech, where pre getting into the tech industry, you think of tech as being software engineers, all right?
Yes.
Not folks in legal, sales, marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was almost that same epiphany all over again for me. Like, oh wait, yeah, of course, you need everyone to help get the shuttles into the sky. And so I appreciate the conversation in that regard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, same for me, I would say. It really in my head, I like many people was thinking, yeah, I got no chance in space, right? But now I'm like, hey, maybe I can become a soap vendor for Hilton. I don't know. Maybe that's my chance to be part of the space economy. So yeah, she gave some great concrete examples. The bit about AI being used in space along with 3D printing. So there are like high-tech jobs as well as, you know, everything else that surrounds space economy. Like there really is an opportunity for everyone.
Yeah. How about you, Salima? What do you think?
You know what? I thought it was really interesting how, there are very few people, at least that I've met in my, career over the years, who are trying to reimagine or like reshape an arena that's just emerging. Because a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And so I think it's really interesting that she's put herself in that position. I mean, she's bold, she's audacious, to say, you know what, here we have this thing that's happening, right? Usually we give a lot of weight to the billionaires that are part of it, right? Because those are the people that we hear most from, like she said. Um, but in fact, let me really open up like who this is for, and by her saying it's for anybody and everybody, I think it really gives people an opportunity to think about their potential in different ways. Both to, like, benefit from the economy, but to also contribute to it. I mean, that's one thing, and I also think that this whole arena of space, like, there's just so much like, there's already so much benefit, like she said, that we've received from space exploration and research. If we are missing entire groups of people that are not part of that, then that means that we continue to perpetuate the things that we're already not part of, right? So, like, whether it's research that impacts our health or whether it's research that's impacting how we move in the world, like whatever that is, right? Like if we need to be part of that as much as anybody else. And so I really appreciate this work that she's doing to, open those doors for people. And I got the sense that she's not only doing it like she's not only working with communities to get them to become aware of the potential, she's also saying to industry, you need to actually open your doors so that people can walk through. And that's really important.
No, it was incredibly important. And again, spot on. So another great guest, another amazing episode of the Global Code.
Yeah. Can I make
the-
this pun? Like it was out of this world.
What can you say after that? I think that's a perfect wrap.
That's a wrap, folks. That's a wrap.
That's absolutely a wrap.
All right. Take care. All.